This is the moment Rome almost split in two. In 272 AD, the entire Eastern Empire answers to one woman, Zenobia. Not as rebel, not as governor, as ruler. She mints coins like an empress, commands armies like a sovereign, controls the richest trade routes in the Roman world. When Aurelian marches east, he has one problem. He can't afford a long war, because every day she rules makes her empire feel permanent. So here's the real question. How do you destroy a rival empire that actually works? Why does it collapse in a matter of months? In 272, Aurelian opens the Eastern campaign under one strict constraint: time. He can't afford months of sieges or a war of attrition. Every city that holds out slows the advance. Every week lost makes Palmyrene rule feel more stable, more accepted. The strategy is forced. Win a chain of surrenders, not just single victories. Aurelian doesn't move a giant army, but a mobile force of tens of thousands, on the order of 30,000 to 40,000, built to march and strike in sequence. Alongside infantry, cavalry plays a decisive role, strengthened in the previous years precisely to respond quickly to crises on multiple fronts. It's an army designed to arrive first, not to sit before walls and wait for engineers to break them. The march makes it obvious. From the Balkans and Thrace, the army crosses the Bosporus and pours into Asia Minor. Here, distance matters more than numbers. Cities are separated by days of marching, and road junctions set the campaign's tempo. An army on campaign averages about 9 to 12 miles a day. Crossing Anatolia takes 4 to 6 weeks, not a few days. Lose time, and you can lose the war before you ever reach Syria. There is another factor, less visible but decisive. In a world without telegraph wires, couriers and merchants carry news, and sometimes it arrives days before the imperial standards. Sources portray Aurelian as a harsh commander, relentless about discipline. He's known for punishing indiscipline and treason brutally, but also for rewarding quick surrender. His reputation runs ahead of the army. When he appears before a city's walls, the question becomes practical. Is it really worth resisting when clemency is offered for surrender? That is how the Eastern campaign takes shape, not as the classic Roman clash of opposing legions, but as a race against time, where every open gate matters more than a battle won on paper. In the spring of 272, when Aurelian enters Anatolia, the war takes on a completely different shape. Palmyra loses ground not because it's crushed in a series of battles, but because Asia Minor's city network shifts. Many cities open their gates. Some resist, but the dominant effect is surrender as a calculation. Each open gate means days, sometimes weeks, saved, and above all, lives spared on both sides. Anatolia isn't a compact frontier. It's a mosaic of plateaus, valleys, and road junctions. Regions like Cappadocia and Galatia matter because they connect the key corridors into Syria. Whoever controls these junctions gains a major strategic and logistical advantage. It's in this context that late antique sources recount a famous episode. Tyana, a city of about 25,000 inhabitants, not a minor place, but a substantial urban center in Inner Anatolia. After taking the city, Aurelian reportedly chose to spare it, foregoing plunder and exemplary punishment. Sources tell the story differently, yet the strategic meaning is clear. A spared city sends a far more powerful message than a destroyed one, to every town ahead. Clemency here isn't kindness. It's a strategic shortcut. If a city learns that surrender means survival, while resistance risks everything, the choice becomes rational. That is how Anatolia begins to yield, not under legionary blows, but under the weight of time Aurelian refuses to lose before the campaign reaches Syria.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
After Anatolia, Aurelian's army still has one geographic choke point to clear before it reaches the East's core: Sicilia. Once past the Sicilian gates, the only usable passes through the Taurus. The road drops into northern Syria toward the Orontes Valley. Whoever controls this passage decides not only who enters Syria, but also who controls the flow of men, goods, and supplies. From the Sicilian gates to Antioch is about 125 miles, roughly 10 days marching for an army, if nothing stops it en route. Between late spring and early summer 272, the Battle of Emae is fought a short distance from Antioch, the main logistical hub of Rome's east. Aurelian commands an army of several tens of thousands, probably between 30 and 40,000, disciplined infantry supported by mobile cavalry contingents. Opposite him stands the Palmyrene army, led by General Zabdas, comparable in numbers but built differently. Less heavy infantry, more armored cavalry and mounted archers. Fast, hard-hitting, and dangerous on open ground in Syria. The sources don't describe the battle in detail, but the most plausible reconstruction is straightforward. Aurelian avoids a frontal clash. Against powerful cavalry, he aims to wear down their momentum, lure them into repeated pursuits, and break their cohesion. It's a tactical choice that favors control of time and space, not immediate shock alone. The outcome is decisive. Rome's victory opens the road to Antioch, which changes hands within days. With a single battle, Aurelian avoids weeks of sieges and seizes Syria's logistical heart before Zenobia can regroup. At this point, it might seem the war is over. In reality, it has just entered its most difficult phase. After the defeat at Emae and the loss of Antioch, the Palmyrene army doesn't dissolve. Antioch and Emesa are about 125 miles apart. At an army's pace, it is 10 to 14 days, but with reorganization and pursuit, it easily becomes 2 or 3 weeks. Within a few weeks, General Zabdas gathers what remains and falls back south along the Orontes corridor. He chooses Emesa, the last place Palmyra can still attempt a regular battle. Emesa is not a random position. It's the junction linking inland Syria to the desert lines. Beyond Emesa, the war can no longer be fought as a conventional campaign. But Emesa also carries a specific symbolic weight in the 3rd century. From here came a priestly dynasty tied to a local solar cult that only a few decades earlier had turned religious power into imperial power. In 218, a young priest from Emesa, remembered as Elagabalus, was lifted onto Rome's throne by Eastern legions. That precedent still matters in 272. Emesa is a reminder that the East is not a passive periphery, but a land that can produce emperors, armies, and alternative legitimacy. It is now high summer 272. Here, Aurelian gives no time. He pursues, forces contact, and wins a second field victory. The sources don't allow a detailed reconstruction, but the outcome is clear. After Emesa, there is no Palmyrene field army left to meet Rome again. From this moment, the war changes nature. It is no longer a contest between two states fielding comparable armies. It becomes a matter of logistics, distance, and endurance, and there is only one direction: Palmyra. After 2 battles, Zenobia can no longer win in the field. From now on, she can only hold out. After Emesa, the war's direction is fixed. Aurelian marches from Emesa toward Palmyra, crossing land that isn't an ordinary province, but desert. Here, water, distance, and the ability to move men and animals without steady supply lines decide everything. Palmyra exists because it controls passages between Syria and the Euphrates. If the oasis falls, the whole system falls with it. The Roman army reaches the city and lays siege. It is not a siege meant to last months. In an isolated oasis, the difference is made in days and a few weeks. Palmyra is fortified, yet isolated. Late antique sources describe an exchange of letters between Aurelian and Zenobia. He demands surrender, promising clemency. She answers, asserting her rank and right to rule. Beyond the details, the meaning is clear. Not rebel versus emperor, but 2 sovereignties. It is an exchange, and both sides know what is at stake. When it becomes clear that Palmyra cannot hold long, Zenobia plays her last card. She tries to flee east, aiming for the Euphrates and Persian help. Palmyra lies about 90 to 125 miles from the river. For a mounted escort, it is a sprint of a few days, but in the desert, every hour counts. Zenobia is captured before she can cross it. Palmyra surrenders. Aurelian, for now, does not destroy it. He leaves a reduced garrison, only a few hundred men, enough to control the city, not to withstand a new revolt. Palmyra is spared, Zenobia is alive, and the war seems closed with a relatively mild settlement, for now. But it is only an apparent truce. In 273, a few months after the surrender of 272, the war is not truly over. Palmyra rebels again. Sources differ on details, but the sequence is clear. The Roman detachment left in the city after the 272 surrender is wiped out. This is not a legion deployed in open battle, but a garrison made of detachments and control troops. We're talking hundreds, perhaps over 1,000, killed or scattered during the uprising. The result is stark. Roman authority inside the city is erased almost overnight. In the 3rd century, this is a point of no return. Eliminating a garrison after accepting imperial clemency means there is no longer any path to compromise. When the Second Revolt breaks out, Aurelian has already returned west, between Italy and Gaul. The news forces him to reverse course. It is a return that takes weeks and thousands of miles, enough for time to become a weapon again. From the western provinces, he turns back toward the east, along the empire's arteries, to Syria's heart. But this time, he isn't coming to negotiate. The repression is brutal. The city is sacked, its power structures dismantled, and Palmyra will never again be a regional power able to control routes, tolls, and territory. Aurelian also strikes the regime's intellectual elites. Advisors and court intellectuals, such as Longinus, are executed. The goal is not merely to punish a revolt, but to prevent that system from ever being reborn in Syria. As for Zenobia, after Palmyra's fall, the sources do not give a single ending. They give different endings. Some have her dead soon after the capture, perhaps during the transfer. Others imagine her alive, taken to Rome as an illustrious prisoner, then removed from politics, and in 274, at Aurelian's triumph, the victory becomes propaganda. The sources diverge, and we cannot choose a definitive version because the record is thin and partisan. But in truth, that isn't the point. Whatever her personal fate, Zenobia disappears when the world she built disappears. She is not defeated only as a queen, but as the architect of a system, an East that had learned to govern itself, pay armies, mint coin, and make decisions without Rome for years. When Aurelian destroys Palmyra, he erases more than a city. He erases the idea of an alternative center in the East. That is the deepest legacy of victory. In AD 272, Aurelian retakes Palmyra, deep in Syria. His legions cross Asia Minor, reassert control along the Euphrates, and bring territory stretching all the way to Egypt back under imperial authority. It looks like the empire is knitting itself together, yet the break still isn't sealed. But political unity doesn't guarantee economic stability. In the 3rd century, Rome's problem isn't just defending frontiers, it's getting money accepted everywhere, from the Rhine to the Danube and down to Alexandria's ports. As metal content shrinks and minting surges, coins still circulate, but they lose credibility. Prices rise, pay buys less in real terms, and the whole logistical machine, from Nile grain to supplies for armies on the Danube, grows more fragile with every new issue. What happens when a state can still win wars, but can no longer control the value of its own money? In AD 215, Emperor Caracalla introduces a new coin, the Antoninianus. Officially, it's worth 2 denarii. In practice, it doesn't contain twice the silver. The gap between declared value and real content isn't huge, but it marks a shift in principle. The state is now asking people to accept a face value higher than the metal inside can justify. From Rome, the new coin spreads quickly along the empire's main routes, toward the Rhine, the Danube, and the Euphrates. It doesn't stay in the capital's markets. It reaches army camps and frontier provinces. It's a pragmatic choice. The emperor must pay a growing army and sustain a logistical network stretching thousands of miles in every direction. Taxes arrive slowly. Military needs are immediate. Minting a coin with a higher face value puts more money into circulation quickly, even without increasing silver reserves in the same proportion. Between the 220s and the 240s, this logic hardens into policy. The coin is no longer only a tool of exchange. It becomes a tool for managing emergencies. Every troop movement needs pay, pack animals, transport, and grain on short notice. As pressure rises, so does the temptation to prioritize face value over actual metal content. At first, the gap is almost invisible, but this is where the crack opens. When a coin depends more on trust than on metal, the problem doesn't hit all at once. It grows, and in the 3rd century, that inflation becomes unstable. In AD 235, a new phase begins. Power no longer passes through regular political succession. It is seized and defended by the army. This is the age of emperors proclaimed in the field, often to answer immediate crises without waiting for Rome's approval. And that changes the way money is used. Between 235 and 260, the empire fights on several fronts at once. On the Rhine between Mogontiacum and Cologne, on the middle Danube between Sirmium and Viminesium, and in the east along the Euphrates between Antioch and Edessa. These aren't only military lines. They carry enormous economic and financial costs. Keeping garrisons, moving units, repairing forts, and buying grain and pack animals all demand a constant flow of payments. We're talking hundreds of thousands of men under arms. You don't need to do the math to feel the scale. This is where the system speeds up. Each emperor has to buy time, not ethically, but operationally. He must secure immediate loyalty with donatives, rewards, and back pay. And when the priority is to pay at once, the coin becomes an accelerant. More is minted, faster. Quality drops, and trust begins to thin. One detail is revealing. In these years, minting becomes frantic. It isn't enough that money exists. It must reach where the fighting is. In practice, the mint follows the war. When a front flares up, striking coin near the armies is faster than waiting for shipments from home. The point is that this isn't just about rising prices. Under constant pressure, the state starts losing the ability to impose one monetary standard that is both uniform and credible. Trust among citizens and merchants stops being automatic.
This coin is not valuable, I can't take it.
In AD 260, the shock is not only military or political, it is administrative. At Edessa, Emperor Valerian is captured by the Sasanians. The symbolism is crushing. For the first time, a Roman emperor is taken prisoner by an Eastern enemy. In the West, an autonomous bloc forms almost immediately, covering Gaul, Germany, and Britain, centered between Cologne and Trier. In the East, another power solidifies from Syria to Egypt. And in the middle, the Italy-Balkans axis remains along the Danubian corridor. In the West, monetary flows gravitate around Cologne and Trier. Along the Danube, centers like Sicilia and Sirmium emerge. And in the East, mints like Antioch and Alexandria tie into Mediterranean ports and the trade and supply routes they support. Coin legends keep proclaiming imperial unity, yet markets draw a practical line. Some issues are accepted without hesitation, others with suspicion or at a discount. The result is a circulation that becomes less uniform year after year. Coins no longer share the same metal content, the same weight, or the same credibility. Standards diverge, quality falls, and trust fractures. In these years, coin hoards rise sharply. We find them in Britain, in northern Gaul, along the Rhine, and in Danubian provinces. Caches buried in haste, often near transit routes or military settlements, beside camps and forts. It's a rational response. When the coin used each day loses reliability, people hold back the issues they consider better and spend the inferior ones first whenever they can, as insurance. It's defensive behavior. Protect what holds value and get rid of what might depreciate further.
They are what I have.
The fact that these hoards grow in frontier zones and along transit routes is no accident. Where war and uncertainty are closer to the fighting, trust in money is more fragile, for merchants and soldiers alike. But how does a merchant tell that a coin looks like silver and isn't? In the 3rd century, the Anatinianus often keeps its shine thanks to a thin surface silvering. With use, that layer wears away and the copper underneath shows. A scratch on the edge, or even a light tap, can reveal it. No laboratory is needed, just experience. When more and more coins expose that gap between surface and core, trust collapses. This is where inflation enters daily life. Money keeps circulating, but it no longer means the same thing everywhere. Its value depends more and more on how and where it is actually accepted. Between the 250s and the 270s, the monetary crisis stops being mainly about how and where coins are minted and becomes a daily problem. When money loses power and credibility, the state faces two alternatives. The first is to keep increasing the volume of coinage. It brings immediate liquidity, but it also feeds mistrust. Weaker coinage pushes prices up in markets and in army supply contracts across the provinces, forcing people to pay more and more for the same goods. The second alternative is more concrete. Instead of collecting taxes in cash and then using it to buy what the army needs, the state begins to demand goods and services directly in kind. Provinces must provide grain, oil, wine, pack animals, carts, labor, loading crews, and travel services. It is no longer only about paying a sum. It is about delivering what keeps the military machine alive. This way, the empire shields itself from monetary instability. A shipment of grain keeps its value even if the Anatolianus is debased. A mule stays useful whatever the silver content of a coin. This is where inflation is felt on the ground. Pay may arrive, but it buys less. Suppliers demand more, or demand goods instead. Cities try to protect stores and reserves. Above all, when money becomes unreliable, logistics gets harder at the worst moment, right when armies are moving. An empire runs on continuous flows of men, food, and transport. Inflation slows those flows. They jam, or they are replaced by direct obligations. That is how a monetary crisis becomes a transformation of the state. From the Nile Delta to Alexandria, then across the Mediterranean to Ostia, grain moves hundreds of miles, day after day, before it reaches Rome and Italy. And through the imperial supply network, it ends up sustaining the major military concentrations on the frontiers between the Rhine and Danube. The result is that the empire changes its structure. When money loses reliability, the state can no longer simply buy what it needs on the market. It has to demand it. Contracts and regular payments give way to mandatory deliveries, requisitions, and imposed services. Provinces no longer just sell grain or pack animals, they must provide them. The burden of crisis no longer travels through prices that rise, but through obligations that tighten. Inflation then doesn't just erode purchasing power, it also changes the relationship between state and society, shifting the economy from exchange mediated by coin to one increasingly based on direct imposition. Already present, but now far more systematic. When Aurelian takes power in AD 270, he inherits a divided empire and a weakened currency. He comes from the Danubian region, where legions hold an unstable frontier against constant pressure. From there, he secures northern Italy, then marches east through the Balkans and Asia Minor. But while he reconquers territory, he runs into a less visible, persistent problem. The coin no longer has a standard recognized everywhere across the empire. Aurelian understands that without solid, reliable money, no political center can be truly authoritative. Reform does not mean suddenly enriching the metal, but restoring a clear, recognizable measure. Around AD 274, he attempts a reorganization of the monetary system and tighter control of the mints. The point isn't just technical, it's political. New issues carry a mark declaring a standard, meant to make the coin's content visible and controllable across the empire in every province. The mints become power centers. Rome remains the symbol, but so do hubs like Mediolanum and Siccia in the west. and Antioch and Alexandria in the east. These are the places that decide which coin circulates and on what terms. And in Rome, a revolt breaks out over the management of the mint, a sign that controlling money means controlling power. Aurelian tries to restore order, but one question remains. Can you stabilize the currency if the empire is not yet won? In the next episode, we see how he tries to close the fracture. In AD 271, after more than 3 centuries, a major barbarian army reaches Italy. The Luthungi cross the Alpine passes and descend into the wide Po Valley. Rome is suddenly vulnerable. The frontier is no longer a distant line along the Rhine or the Danube. Now the front line is a few days' march from the capital. A year earlier, in 270, a new emperor had been proclaimed, not in Rome, but along the Danube. Aurelian is no court politician. He's shaped by the frontier, where legions decide directly who rules, and where every hesitation is paid in human lives. But the problem runs deeper than an invasion. In the west, along the Rhine, a separate empire controls Gaul. In the east, Syria has already shown how fragile authority can be. The currency is worth less. The armies demand pay and grain. Reuniting Rome won't mean winning battles alone. It means restoring imperial credibility across a world stretching from the Rhine to the Nile. Aurelian must prove that an empire that looks finished can still be governed. In September AD 270, after Emperor Claudius II dies at Sirmium in Pannonia, probably from the plague, succession opens in uncertainty. Claudius' brother, Quintillus, is proclaimed emperor in Italy, based in Aquileia, and at first wins recognition from part of the army and from the Senate in Rome. But the Danube soon decides. Yet on the Danube, the legions chose another commander, Aurelian. Within weeks, the balance shifts. Quintillus loses military support and dies. Sources say by suicide or killed by his own men before the armies ever meet. Aurelian does not come from the Senate or Rome's aristocracy. He is a commander forged along the Danube, where recent campaigns were fought against Goths and other peoples beyond the river. His authority comes directly from the frontier armies that chose him. In 270, the priority is to stabilize the middle Danube. The river is a continuous contact line. Quick raids, strikes, plunder, then a retreat beyond the frontier. Rome answers by concentrating forces and moving them quickly between hubs like Sirmium and Viminesium, linked by military roads that can shift detachments within days. In this phase, imperial command has to stay mobile at all times. The Danube is also a strategic hinge. From here, Rome can intervene quickly toward northeastern Italy through the Balkan corridor, or pivot east toward Thrace and the Bosporus. It is still the balance point between west and east. But as Aurelian strengthens this line, the empire remains divided. In the west, along the Rhine, the Gallic Empire still stands. In 270, it is led by Victorinus, and in 271, it will pass to Tetrarchus I, with power centered in Cologne and Trier. In the east, Syria lies under Palmyrene influence after Odenathus' campaigns and Zenobia's rise. When Aurelian takes power in 270, he does not inherit one front. He inherits 3 distinct power blocks: the Danubian belt under his direct control, the west along the Rhine, the Gallic Empire, then led by Victorinus, and the Syrian east, tied to Palmyra. Reunification isn't yet an official goal. The priority is to keep the Danube line from breaking and to stop Italy from becoming the next front. In 271, that danger becomes suddenly real. In AD 271, a Germanic group moving in force, identified in the sources as the Luthungi, breaks into northern Italy. The column crosses the Alpine corridors, linking the Danubian region to the Italian plain, and heads toward the Via Aemilia corridor, the spine of northern Italy that connects the plains cities and intersects the roads climbing to the passes. This is not a handful of raiders. The fighting core, estimated at 10,000 to 20,000 men, is likely accompanied by wagons, booty, and families, as often happens in incursions of this era. Aurelian is stationed along the Danubian belt between Pannonia and Boeotia. He leaves the Danube line and moves toward Italy as quickly as he can, with mobile units drawn from the frontier army. Sources give no precise figures, but the operation implies a substantial force, likely 20,000 to 30,000 men, combining legionary infantry with a significant share of cavalry, now essential for responding to fast incursions. The first phase is the Germanic penetration. Plunder, then a rapid drive south, meant to hit and withdraw before Roman forces can concentrate. It is a string of raids aimed at booty, not conquest. Speed is their real protection. Aurelian intercepts the invaders at Placentia, near modern Piacenza. The first clash appears to go against the Romans. The speed of the incursion and the dispersion of units make immediate coordination difficult. For a moment, the initiative passes to the Luthungi. The danger is not only military, it is psychological. If northern Italy can be entered, cities farther south begin to fear that nobody can protect them. Roman command reacts by reorganizing its forces and pressing hard along the routes back north. Fighting shifts towards Ticinum, modern Pavia, and along the Ticino River. With retreat lines cut, the Germanic column is gradually driven back over the Alps within weeks before it can fully regroup. Italy is cleared, but the effect endures. For the first time in more than 3 centuries, the empire's heart has been threatened directly. After the northern campaign, Aurelian goes to Rome. In 271, he begins building the Aurelian Walls, a massive new circuit about 12 miles long, raised around the capital. The walls defend not only the monumental center, but a far wider urban area, including suburbs and infrastructure designed for siege conditions. The decision marks a strategic shift. Rome is no longer automatically safe. The lesson is clear. Repelling one incursion isn't enough. If an army can reach the Italian plain in weeks, Italy is no longer a rear area. It is a potential front. In 272, Aurelian intervenes in the east. He crosses the Balkans, crosses the Bosporus, and advances through Asia Minor into Syria. Within months, the picture is clear. Palmyra is defeated, Zenobia is captured, and in 273, a second uprising is crushed for good. Here, the details of the battle don't matter. The effect does. For Aurelian, what counts is what the campaign gives back. Inner Syria returns to Roman control. Cities like Antioch fall back into the imperial orbit. Links toward the Euphrates are reopened. Access to Egypt and Alexandria, an essential hub for Mediterranean supplies, is no longer in doubt. Operationally, the East is not just rediscovered territory. It is a corridor reopened. It proves the center can still intervene quickly, on short notice, and impose obedience across great distances. But the Eastern Campaign also teaches a lesson. In 273, Palmyra rises again. What a campaign regains can slip away if it is not held continuously. Military victory does not automatically translate into stable control once the army marches away. When Aurelian leaves Syria, the East is formally back under Roman authority, but the empire still depends on turning victory into lasting administration. That is the difference between reconquering territory and truly unifying it. In AD 274, after restoring the East, Aurelian turns west. The goal is no longer to contain a crisis, but to close a fracture that has been open since 260. Beyond the Alps, the Gallic Empire has existed for over a decade. It was born when Rome could not guarantee security and regular pay on every frontier. In Gaul, authority rebuilt itself locally. The march begins from northern Italy. Imperial forces cross the Alpine passes and enter Gaul along the major road corridors that link the Po Plain to the Rhone Valley and to Inner Gaul. This is no limited expedition. Sources give no exact numbers, but it is plausible that Aurelian concentrates several tens of thousands of men, legionary infantry and mobile cavalry, for a decisive campaign to end it. On the other side stands Tetrarchus I, Emperor of the Gallic Empire, with his political center at Trier and control of Gaul and, formerly, Britain. Numbers are uncertain, but the forces are substantial and comparable in scale to the imperial army. The Gallic army is not an improvised rebel band. It is a structured military apparatus that has defended the Rhine frontier for years. Aurelian's strategy is clear: avoid a long war and hit the command system. He advances along a corridor meant to separate Inner Gaul from the Rhine line, breaking cohesion between political centers and frontier forces. He forces the Gallic Empire to choose: defend its political heart or defend the frontier. It is a way to split and weaken Tetrarchus's forces before a decisive clash in open battle. The decisive clash comes in 274 in an area that late sources link to Chalons, though the exact location remains debated. The battle is not described in detail, but the outcome is clear. Tetrarchus either surrenders or is captured. Accounts differ. Late writers even hint at another possibility, that he sought a negotiated exit under military pressure and internal fragility to save his army and himself. Details are shaky, but the political fact remains. The West chooses to return to Rome, and the Gallic Empire stops existing as an autonomous entity. Some late sources say Tetrarchus is spared and reintegrated, and given an administrative post in Italy. That, too, is reunification, turning an enemy into an imperial official inside the system. Reunification is complete. From the Atlantic to the east, the empire is formally under one emperor again. But the West does not give way because it vanishes overnight. It yields because it is worn down. Years of pressure on the Rhine frontier, problems of legitimacy, dynastic instability, and isolation have weakened cohesion. Aurelian strikes when the structure still functions, but is fragile. In 274, the empire is won again, not through symbolic conquest, but because separate command centers have been eliminated. The fracture opened 14 years earlier is closed by a rapid, concentrated campaign carried out at the right moment. Now the question is whether political unity can become lasting stability in practice. In 274, after Tetrarchus is defeated, no alternative imperial centers remain. From the Atlantic to Syria, Gaul returns under Aurelian's direct control. The east was brought back under control the year before, and the Danubian belt is stabilized. In this context, the title Restitutor Orbis appears, restorer of the world. It isn't just celebration, but a political statement. After 14 years of fragmentation, imperial unity is credited to one man's initiative. But reunifying does not automatically stabilize. Structures that adapted to division must now answer to a single center again and rebuild routines of obedience. Provincial governors, frontier commanders, and urban elites have to realign with an authority that for years was not the only one. In 274, Aurelian celebrates a triumph in Rome. The public image is an empire reassembled, but the balance remains personal. Cohesion depends on the emperor's presence and energy, on his ability to move fast from one front to another. In AD 275, while marching east, Aurelian is assassinated in Thrace. He does not fall to an external enemy, but to an internal conspiracy. The empire he reunified suddenly finds itself without its center of gravity. His death leaves a fundamental question. Can a state this fast survive if its unity depends so heavily on the initiative of a single man? And from that question, the next phase of the crisis begins. In AD 284, an army returns from the east, marching through Asia Minor. At its center is Emperor Numerian, carried in a closed litter and kept out of sight. Officially, he is ill. In fact, he has been dead for days. When the truth comes out, the chain of command breaks instantly. An army cannot march without an emperor. One man steps forward, Diocletian. Tradition says that to cement his power, he kills the man accused of the murder right in front of the troops. These are the years after Aurelian's death, the moment it becomes clear that Rome can no longer depend on one man. Now the question is different. How can Diocletian reorganize the empire so it survives? In AD 275, after Aurelian is assassinated, the question of succession opens up again. In Rome, Marcus Claudius Tacitus is recognized as emperor, with the Senate playing a major role. But he cannot stay in the capital. Almost immediately, the priority shifts back to war, and Tacitus heads east. Between 275 and 276, new incursions hit Asia Minor. The names shift in the sources. Goths, Heruli, sometimes Scythians, but the pattern is clear. Groups from the Black Sea and Pontic region exploit the succession crisis and push on to the Anatolian plateau. The places most often mentioned are Cappadocia and Cilicia, the corridor from the interior down through the Taurus passes to the coastal plains. This is not a Persian war or a grand conquest campaign. It is a series of opportunistic raids, enough to destabilize a crucial hinge between Europe and Syria. Tacitus is portrayed as close to the senatorial world, an attempt to give the succession a more Roman, stable face. But events move fast. In 276, Tacitus dies amid this emergency. Sources disagree on whether it was illness or murder. The next transition comes immediately. Florian, a relative of Tacitus, is proclaimed in the west and initially recognized by many provinces and their troops. In less than a year, the empire changes emperors again and again. Tacitus rules for months. Florian lasts weeks. In the east, meanwhile, the armies raise another name, Probus, an experienced commander. For several weeks, there are 2 Augusti, and the struggle shifts to Asia Minor. Florian's reign ends the same way many do. His own men abandon and kill him. Probus becomes sole emperor. The empire does not collapse. On paper, it is still one. But this begins a decade in which stability rests not on clear rules of succession, but on who controls the decisive units, and who can impose authority fastest in the field. In 276, after Florian's brief reign ends, Probus is left as the sole Augustus. A career commander who rose through the army, he rules like many 3rd century emperors, not from a palace, but on the move, along a military itinerary. His reign lasts 6 years, from 276 to 282, and the empire's respite is only temporary. Between 277 and 278, Probus concentrates forces in Gaul and along the Rhine after years of strain and raids. The sources speak of campaigns against the Franks and the Alemanni, not one decisive battle, but a sequence of operations to repel incursions, retake towns, and install security along the Rhine line. Fighting shifts between key points on the front, the Cologne region and the corridor toward Trier. The goal is to make the frontier work again as a system, with garrisons, roads, and fortified posts. In 278 to 279, the center of gravity shifts to the Danube, in the provinces of Pannonia and Moesia. Pressure comes from groups beyond the river, Sarmatians and Carpi, in the source's usual labels, and the response is the same: rapid marches, pursuits, and counter-raids, and above all, the emperor's personal presence where the line threatens to give way. The empire stays united, but command shuttles constantly between the Rhine and the Danube. Probus has one striking trait: he uses soldiers as labor. Beyond campaigns, the army is put to work. Drainage, canals, fortifications, even vineyards, in an attempt to make the military machine productive in peacetime. But it also weighs on the troops and can breed resentment among hardened veterans. Around 280, local usurpations flare up. Probus crushes them, but the warning remains. Legitimacy is fragile when the emperor is far away. In 282, while at Sirmium in Pannonia, Probus is killed in a mutiny. Once again, it is not an external enemy who brings down the emperor, but internal violence. Out of that vacuum, Carus emerges as his successor, and attention swings back once more to the great eastern frontier. In 282, after Probus is killed, power passes to Carus. It marks a shift. For years, the empire's energy had been absorbed by the Rhine and Danube. Now attention turns east again, in force, to a frontier that works as a system of cities, rivers, and corridors leading into Mesopotamia. In 283, Carus launches a campaign against the Sasanians under Bahram II. He advances along the Euphrates-Tigris corridor into the heart of Mesopotamia. The Roman army reaches and occupies areas near Seleucia and Ctesiphon, the great Persian imperial capital on the Tigris. The broad outline of the expedition is clear, but the details and the true scale of its success remain poorly documented. In 283, the Mesopotamian campaign, probably near Ctesiphon itself, the emperor dies abruptly. The cause is unclear. Some accounts speak of illness, others claim a lightning bolt struck the imperial camp. With Carus gone, command passes to his sons, who already held titles and a share of power. Carinus governs the west from Italy, while Numerian stays in the east with the army and begins the long march through Asia Minor. During that return march in 284, the crisis takes on an almost unreal, eerie tone. Sources say Numerian travels in a closed litter, keeping hidden from his men, officially because of eye trouble. Then the soldiers sense something is wrong. Tradition says the truth is discovered only when the stench becomes impossible to ignore. Numerian has been dead for days, and the column keeps moving, without knowing or daring to admit that it has lost its emperor. It is a macabre episode, but it reveals the deeper problem. If an emperor can vanish on the march, succession is not governed by rules. It is governed by emergency. In 284, the crisis narrows to one brutal fact. The Eastern Army is marching back through Asia Minor, where Numerian is found dead inside his litter. The chain of command breaks, and the question becomes immediate. Who controls the army, and with what legitimacy? On November 20th, 284, near Nicomedia in Bithynia, the troops proclaim Diocletian, a senior officer of the Eastern Army, emperor. He will take the name Diocletian. The proclamation is immediately shadowed by suspicion. The main accused is Aper, the Praetorian prefect blamed for Numerian's death. This is where a famous but uncertain episode appears. Diocletian is said to have killed Aper in front of the assembled soldiers. We do not know if it happened exactly that way, but the political message is clear. The new authority responds to an internal crisis and claims legitimacy through a deliberate public act. To become sole Augustus, Diocletian and Carneus must converge on the Balkans. Legitimacy will be decided there, in battle. In 285, the decisive clash comes near the Margus, the river often identified with the Morava in the Balkan-Danubian zone. We do not know the maneuvers in detail, but this is not a minor encounter. It is plausible that both sides field forces on the order of 20,000 to 30,000 men, legionary infantry backed by mobile cavalry. In armies of that size, even small percentage losses mean thousands of men, and a real risk of command breaking down. Carinus dies during or just after the battle, probably killed by one of his own officers, perhaps for personal motives. Whatever the exact sequence, the political fact is blunt. The last rival falls because of an internal rupture, once again, not because of an external enemy. Diocletian remains sole emperor, but the sequence from 275 to 285 has already proved a point. An empire this large cannot depend on the presence and speed of a single man. From that realization comes the most important choice of his reign, turning power from something personal into something structural. After the victory of 285, Diocletian sees that an empire stretching from the Rhine to the Euphrates cannot be held by one man anymore. Late in 285 and into 286, he elevates Maximian, first as Caesar, then as Augustus. Propaganda shifts as well. Diocletian links himself to Jupiter, Maximian to Hercules. Power is presented as something higher than the man who happens to hold it. This is a political decision even more than a military one. Two centers of command, east and west, so you can react without waiting weeks for an emperor to march across the map. The clearest sign is geographic. Emperors no longer live in Rome. They choose frontier base cities, Nicomedia in the east Mediolanum in the west. Rome becomes a symbol. Command is decentralized. The need is immediate. In Gaul, revolts break out, known in the sources as the Bagaudae, and Maximian suppresses them. The Bagaudae are not a foreign army. They are local groups, peasants and deserters, turning insecurity and tax pressure into rebellion. This is not only about barbarians on the frontier. It is about internal instability in the countryside and local networks that can erode Roman control from within. And while the West tries to catch its breath, a new internal front opens. Between 286 and 293, a naval commander, Carausius, sets himself up as an independent ruler in Britain and along the Channel coast. The point is telling. Carausius does not present himself as a mere rebel. He mints coins and produces imperial-style propaganda, trying to look legitimate, as if power could exist outside the center. For Rome, the Channel is a watery frontier. If you control the fleets and the ports, you can keep Britain separate from the mainland. In 293, Diocletian formalizes the answer. The Tetrarchy is born. 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars, each with territorial responsibilities. This is not the division of the empire. It is the division of command. 4 men, 4 courts, 4 zones meant to cut response times. Galerius is assigned the Danubian and eastern sector, Constantinus Chlorus the Gallic one. Command centers multiply too, each closer to its frontier. Nicomedia for Diocletian, Mediolanum for Maximian. Trier becomes Constantinus's western base, while the Danubian zone remains Galerius's pivot. The idea is simple. Spread command so a sudden vacuum cannot reopen the crisis. And it delivers results. In 296, Constantinus reconquers Britain, ending the regime of Electus, Carausius' successor. In parallel, between 296 and 299, Galerius fights the Sasanians. After a difficult opening phase, the Tetrarchic machine wins a decisive success and imposes a treaty that stabilizes the eastern frontier after years of pressure and raids. And in 297 to 298, Diocletian intervenes in Egypt and besieges Alexandria, a reminder that major Mediterranean nodes cannot simply be left hanging. On top of that comes an attempt to impose discipline from above. In 301, the Edict on Maximum Prices tries to curb price instability. This is no vague proclamation. It is a huge list, with more than 1,000 entries for goods and wages. It is the state trying to put a price on chaos. In 303, the Great Persecution begins, another instrument of state control, this time religious and ideological. In 305, Diocletian makes an almost unprecedented move. He abdicates. Power passes by rule, not by assassination or sudden acclamation. And in a famous tradition, when asked to return, he says he would rather tend his cabbages at his residence in Split. Aurelian reunified Rome with force and speed. Diocletian tries to make it governable through structure by design. If this journey through the 3rd century crisis helped you, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to support the project.